guys. So we hope everybody had a really good start to their spring. Over the Easter weekend, we started getting our garden set finally, which we're really excited about. We have about a 31 by 58 area here tilled in that we're going to start planting our garden for. But first things first, I want to go through and test out the soil. If you want to see pictures of how we did this and how we tilled it up, you can go on our Facebook page. There's some pictures up there of what we did. And otherwise, I'm going to start testing the soil. So what I want to do is I want to do about 4 test sites around the garden, kind of in a little ways around each corner or so. I'm going to take one sampling from each corner for doing a pH test and another sampling for doing our NPK test. I'm going to use about a cup of soil from each area. You can do less if you want. I like to have a little bit more so that we get a more accurate reading. And since this is going to be for fruits and vegetables, we're going to take it from about 4 inches down or so. For my pH test, I'm going to do it in a nice little container. We don't need to add water to that. We're just going to let it dry out. And I've got a bit bigger of a container. I'm using some of my old nutritional shake containers that I've saved to do it in. You're better off if you have a clear container to do it with, but this is what I have available, so that's what I'm going to use. Alright, so we brought our 4 soil tests inside. Again, we have 2 samples from every quadrant of the garden. We did our garden into 4 quadrants. If you have a bigger garden, you may want to do more than that. A smaller garden, you may want to do less. We have 2 samples from each quadrant. The sample in the lower white containers that we have is going to be for our pH test. And the larger white containers, that's going to be used for our nutrient test, our NP and K. I am using the LusterLeaf Rapid Test Kit. I got this online on Amazon, pretty cheap. I believe it was just over $10 or so. I haven't used it before, but it did have some good reviews online for accuracy, and it's something that you can do in your home without having to send it out to a lab and pay for that and wait for your results. But it seems like it's going to be a pretty simple test. For our first thing, we went through our soil and made sure that we got any debris that we could out of our soil. No stems, roots, little pebbles, anything to that effect. We want as clean of soil as that we can get. The ones in our lower white containers that are going to be for our pH test, we're going to just leave those out and let them naturally dry out. You don't want to do anything to them to make them dry. Don't put them in the oven or anything to that effect. You want to keep your test results very accurate, so we're just going to leave them out to sit until they're naturally dry. For the ones for our nutrient test, we're going to need to add water to those to start. You're going to want to use distilled water or bottled water at least, unless you have filtered water in your home. I have well water, and my well water has tested very hard, so we don't want to use that because that is going to affect the results of our test because it has high iron and manganese and things like that, and we don't want to alter our test results. Unless you were doing houseplants or something to that effect, then you might want to use that water because that's what you're going to be using to water your plants all the time, so it would have an effect on the nutrient levels. But since this is for our vegetable garden, it's going to be watered with rainwater, so I'm using distilled water to actually do this test. The amount of water that you're going to add is going to be in a 1:5 ratio, 1 part soil, 5 parts water. I'm using a cup of soil for each test, a little bit of a higher quantity so we get a nice accurate result. You can use less or more if you want to. So to explain that, if I'm using 1 cup of soil, I'm going to use 5 cups of water. If you're using a 1/4 cup of soil, you're going to use 1 1/4 cups of water. If you're using 2 cups of soil, you're going to use 10 cups of water, so on and so forth. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and add 5 cups of water to each one of these containers. Okay, now that we've added our water to each one, we're going to cap each container nice and tight so that they don't leak. And we're going to go through and shake each container really well for about a minute apiece. Okay, now that I've finished shaking them all up, since I'm indoors, I'm going to remove the cap so that I don't take a chance of redisturbing the water as it settles. If you're doing this outside, especially if you're near trees or a windy day, you may want to leave something over the top of it, maybe something clear that you can see through, so that no debris end up falling inside and adjusting your results. I'm using clear or white containers because that's what I have available. If you have clear containers, you're better off, because what we're going to do is it can take anywhere from an hour to 24 hours, but we're just going to let these sit until the water completely settles and it's as clear as you can get it. The water may be a little bit cloudy, but you don't want it to have any debris still floating around with it. You don't want that mucky dirt, which is what we have, or mud water, which is what we have in there right now. When you do choose your container, I highly suggest using, I highly suggest using a plastic container and not metal or something that's going to potentially affect the way your results come out. So again, pretty much now it's just a waiting game. We're going to wait for this soil to dry out. You may want to come around every once in a while to your pH soil test and just stir the dirt around to give it some extra drying and that kind of thing. Get the wet dirt off the bottom. It'll make the drying go a little bit faster. And otherwise, try not to touch these containers at all, because any little vibration is going to cause the water to stir more and you want to let it settle out. So now we're just on a waiting game, and I'll bring you guys back when it's all set to go. Okay, so we gave it the full 24 hours for our water to settle out really well and let our soil for the pH test dry out the best that we could in the sunlight. What our test kit comes with is for each of your nutrients, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potash, and then one for the pH test. Each comes with one of these little containers. Each container has 2 cartridges in it, which I already have full if you can see. It's got a smaller cartridge for your test and a larger cartridge for your comparison. We did the pH test first, which only takes about 1 minute for your results. As you can see, I already have my results in this one. What you're going to do is it has 2 lines. It has a soil fill line and a water fill line. You fill your soil fill line with your dry soil, and then you're going to want to have had a little bit of your distilled or bottled water aside for these tests. You're going to fill it up to your water fill line with your distilled water, and then each test comes with these capsules. They look just kind of like vegetable capsules if you take supplements. And you would take one of these capsules out and you would just literally break it apart at the seams right above your test cartridge. Let the supplement fall in there, recap it, give it a shake, and wait your 1 minute. And then you'll have your result. To test your results, you do want to hold these up to daylight, not direct sunlight, but just put it in front of a window to get a pretty good reading of what your actual color is. And then on the side of it, it does have a chart here for your comparison. And though this will look a little darker right now, when you hold it in front of the window, I'm right at about 5.5 for my pH for this. The last test that I did, I was at about a 5.8, 5.9. And I'm still going to test the other 2 batches to get a good average. But so far, that's not bad for vegetable gardens. Vegetable gardens, most of your vegetables are going to want to be between 5.5 and 7. Getting above 7.5 or below 5.5 is getting to a little bit of a danger zone to where you'd want to amend it. When you do your nutrient tests, as you can see for the 2 cartridges, rather than just filling the test cartridge, I also filled the comparison cartridge because, when you look in here, you can see that the little blocks are slightly translucent. And since your water is cloudy, this is going to give you a more accurate reading because it's also going to slightly change the colors on your color chart to match that cloudiness so that you get an accurate reading. And you're going to do the same exact thing. You're not going to add any soil to this. You're just going to add that water that you left to settle. And then you're going to take out your matching color cartridge and you're going to open it right above your test side and dump it in there, cap it, give it a shake. But these you're waiting about 10 minutes for, which I have a few more minutes before that. Especially in the potash one, you can see that some of your powder in there gets blocked up before you actually take your reading. You just give it another shake to make sure that your color is consistent throughout your entire test side. But we'll do that for all 4 sides, and we've made up cards for each section. so that we can get a good average reading of what we're going to need for soil amendments. We've already done one test so far, in which, as I said before, the pH was around 5.8, 5.9. For the section 2, it's dropped down to about a 5.5. That's why I like to do 4 sections, so you get a really good reading. Okay, so after doing all of our tests, we have an average of about a 5.7, 5.8 for our pH, which isn't too bad. I'll probably keep that right around there. I don't think I'm going to adjust it much. Our nitrogen is pretty much depleted throughout the entire garden, so we're definitely going to add some. I'm probably going to go with some dried blood meal for that. I've used it in the past, never had problems with it, so I'm definitely going to be adding some of that to the garden to adjust that. Our phosphorus, on the other hand, is at a good, adequate level. It's right at the mid-range, so I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think I'm going to touch it too much. And our potash is completely off the charts, up in the surplus in every single area, so we'll definitely watch for any over-nutriating for that for any of our plants. If anything comes up, at least we know that that's something we can refer to, that they might be getting a little bit too much potash in there. So overall, the LusterLeaf Rapid Test Soil Kit was pretty easy to use. It was pretty cheap. It comes with 10 capsules for every single test. It wasn't too expensive. I got it right on Amazon. It really simplified, really easy to use. I would definitely say that it seems to have pretty accurate readings. Granted, I'm not comparing this to actually sending it to a lab, but from taking it from 4 different areas, I didn't have where one area was at one end of the spectrum and another area was at the other end. They seem to all be pretty close to each other, so we seem to know that it's working pretty accurately. It also gives you a lot of information about how to do your test, about different ways to adjust your nutrients afterwards, and it actually comes with an entire chart of all different types of plants, from flowers to trees to shrubs to fruits, vegetables, etc., and what they like to have for pH ranges and nutrients, so on and so forth. And then of course you always want to do your own research outside what this specific test kit tells you, but it does give you a lot of information to start your research off of. So, and always, also I want to mention, always remember, guys, that when you're testing your soil and when you're adjusting your soil, it is much better to do this the year beforehand. Do it in fall so that the soil has time to actually adjust and prepare itself before you start planting in spring. But since this is a new home and this is our first chance to start the garden, I am going to do some adjusting this year. It will take a couple years before our soil really gets to where we want it to be and goes through a couple growing seasons, but at least we have a good starting off point. So thanks for joining us on this quick video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.